Thank you for joining this session. And I want to thank you for joining this session, especially as you think about the possibilities of pursuing a career in art, even as I share my own journey with you. I actually started out, and my name is Margaret. I'm the former director of visual and performing arts for Newark Public Schools. I'm recently retired and beginning to start my own new career. But I began my journey as a visual art educator immediately following college. And I actually taught art for 2 years in the state of Virginia. Although I was from New Jersey, I could not get a job in art education in New Jersey at the time. So I ended up going to the state of Virginia to teach. I did that for 2 years, and then I came back and enrolled in school at Parsons School of Design, where I majored in fashion design. And upon finishing my career, upon finishing my studies, I actually worked in the garment industry for 15 years as a designer, designing women's wear apparel. And I'll talk to you about that more then. But when I was in school, I actually, no, don't. But when I was in school, if you look at the slide here, that first slide is me with some of my students in New York visiting galleries in Chelsea. And then that second photo was an opportunity, some things that you may be pursuing when you're in college or even in high school now, to be able to get some publicity and advertisement for yourself. I actually won a design competition and was fortunate in school, while I was in school at Parsons, to be able to travel to Switzerland at the expense of the Swiss textile industry. And they had students from 15 schools internationally attend and participate in a fashion show there. And this was just one of the articles that was done by a local newspaper at that time. That third slide was my the last career that I was in as director of visual and performing arts. And here you see me with my wonderful team, the two supervisors that worked with me. One of them had a visual art background. The other was a music educator previously. And then, of course, our fabulous clerk, who also had a background in the arts. You can flip it over now. So I'm just going to talk to you about each of these careers that I was in. And I'm going to start with fashion designer because I spent more time as an educator than I did as a designer. So I just want to start with fashion designer. And when I was in this particular role as a designer, it's a very, very competitive industry. And here I'm just giving you a list, and I'm sharing the slide deck with you as well. But you'll see a list of some of the job duties and some of the requirements that it takes in order to get into this field. I'm actually collecting this information from a website that I've actually provided a link with you because they list a lot of different careers in the arts, and they list the job duties and the requirements and some promotional information about how to pursue these careers. But I want to point out the salary aspect here because I felt this was kind of skewed, or actually, I think this is more of a range for beginning fashion designers, because I was in the garment industry like 30 years ago. And upon leaving, at that time, the starting salary for an assistant designer was about $25,000. So it's showing like $50,000 now. But designers make upwards depending on what kind of company you work for. You can make, 3-digit figure salary. The 80,000 is a low figure because you definitely go up into the 3 figures. And at the time that I left the industry, my salary was way higher than what's shown there. But I think it's really, if you can go to the next slide, because you'll get this slide with all of this detailed information if you want to go back into it. But I want to talk about some of the things that you actually had to do as a fashion designer. So as the designer for a company, you're actually not only responsible for the silhouettes or the clothing that you actually see in the stores, but you're also responsible for selecting those fabrics and materials that are going to be used. But even before you do that, you have to explore and research trends, like what's happening in the market or what's going to happen in the future, because this line, even though I'm working on it now, it actually won't get delivered to stores until like 2 years later. So you're always projecting into the future when you're developing a line. You also are responsible for selecting what the color stories are going to be for any kind of collection. And if you're working for a company, typically design anywhere from 4 to 6 seasons a year. It depends on the company itself and who their customers are. But in doing that, you're selecting the fabrics and you're deciding what colors those fabrics are going to be produced in. So the sample you see here, the fabric board, those are actual fabrics. And you see the plaid, there's a check there, and there's also a print, which you can't see fully. But you're actually responsible for doing what we call pitching colors. So you decide, you may see a plaid that you like, but the plaid is not in the colors that you like. So you get to redesign the plaid and say, I want this color in the warp and this color in the weft. And so that means that you have to have some understanding of textiles in order to be a designer, to be able to convey your ideas to the actual supplier of these goods. You also, with prints, we used to shop prints. Print studios would come over from Europe all the time, and there would just be seasons when we would just shop prints and prints and prints. And we would select prints that we would like to use for our lines. But the prints may not be in the colors that we want them to be in for our collection. So we had to repitch the prints. We would send them out at that time. This was before computer technology. We used to send them out, and people used to hand paint them, and they might do like 5 colorways until I saw a colorway that I actually liked and thought would work for the collection. Later on, as a designer, we actually had an in-house person who could pitch the prints for us on the computer when we began to get more computer technology. But I also found that the colorings didn't come up as clear as if they were hand painted. And then to the left here, you actually see some of the garments as they reflect what you see in the fabrics there. So you can actually see what the looks and the styles look like. Now, I was a designer like over 30 years ago. So we're talking about clothing that was designed back in like 1990. And you can see shoulder pads were a big thing then. But you can also see how these garments reflect what's in the fabrics there. You can go to the next slide, which is another example of another collection that was done, just to give you a sense of just, here we had 2 prints and a plaid with some solids. But again, just to give you an idea that, you do all aspects. And these collections were both in the same season, because in one season, you could actually do like 5 collections. That meant 5 different colorways. That meant 5 different sets of silhouettes. And part of even doing the silhouettes as a designer, you actually had to understand garment construction, because you need to be able to draw very clear sketches of the garments to give to the pattern makers, who will then make those garments into 3D models that you then would see on a live model and make corrections to the fit before they put it into production. So you literally need to have a very clear understanding of garment construction and how different fabrics work in different garments. You can go to the next slide. This next slide, this is another collection that I did while I was working for a company called J.G. Hook. And here I've added a photo, because also there's the whole marketing aspect of collection. And you can actually see a photo of some of the garments that were made in this particular collection. And that particular photo appeared in the New York Times Fashion of the Times section. And again, this is like back in the 90s. When we had physical newspapers. Now a lot of stuff is done digitally as well as physically. You can move forward. And these are just some of Women's Wear Daily, which is a huge publication for the garment industry. It literally was where we would always go to find what was happening in the industry, what was current in the industry. These actual photos, again, when you think about companies and marketing and promoting the line, these are all J.G. Hook collections that were featured in Women's Wear Daily throughout different seasons while I was working there. So PR is really an important part of the business. So now I'm going to segue over to my career as an art educator. And again, here, this is more of a starting salary. It says average salary. But I know, for example, in Newark right now, starting salaries are like $62,000, no, $62,000 for a beginning teacher. So there's a range. It depends on what district you're in, how strong the union is, et cetera. And again, you'll be able to go into great detail with the job duties and the requirements. But this particular career requires certification. So you absolutely have to go and get a degree in education in order to be an art teacher. For fashion design, my pathway was through education, but there are many designers who don't necessarily go to go to college for a degree in fashion design. But the advantage of going to school is that you begin to build a network of people and you're exposed to companies because they interact with the schools. So it's not required, but it is an advantage if you are in an education program. So as a visual art educator, this for me was like one of the best jobs I've ever had. It was something that I always wanted to do, was work with students. And I took the pathway of going into fashion design after teaching for only 2 years. I really did it just to prove that I could do it. I mean, that was the sole reason. And although I did it for 15 years, I tried to get out multiple times, but it was a challenge at the time to find visual art positions that I wanted to get into. So I stayed and stuck with that. And then after 15 years, I just decided to up and quit my job in New York and walk away and just take a year off to figure out how to get back into doing what I wanted. Fashion design for me became something that felt very superficial at the time. And it was interesting because my own peers like couldn't even afford to go to the store and buy some of our jackets, which in the 90s like would cost $300 at retail. So I just wanted to do something that was more meaningful in my life. And that's why I went back into art education. And as you can flip, as an art educator, you can go to the next slide, Kira. As an art educator, to be able to work with students, I actually worked at the high school level, which was what I wanted to do. As an art educator in the state of New Jersey, you're actually certified to teach K through 12. I had two wonderful experiences, one working in a comprehensive high school in Newark, New Jersey, the other one working in a magnet school in Newark, New Jersey. These are images working with my comprehensive high school, students at Weequahic High School, where I found they were some of the most creative students that you could ever meet, in contrast to my students at Arts High, which had more technical skills. And I really had to work on the creativity aspect with them. But it's really important as an educator that you're finding out where your students are and how to bring out whatever their creative potential is, because every single human being has creative potential. So it's like, how do you tap into a student who really wasn't interested in art but got assigned to that class, and how do they become an artist? And that was my big goal. And I have to say that we were really, really fortunate. I had really, really wonderful students. I exposed them to a lot of different media. You can see the slide in the upper left there. Those are students who participated in the 10th Congressional Art Competition that any of you can participate within your congressional district. And in the center slide, that's where I brought in a teaching artist who specialized in doing creative boxes and had that person, actually a real working artist, work with my students so that they could have that experience. And she worked with them through that process. And then on the far right, that's us taking a trip to New York City to visit some galleries. And everybody's got their sketchbook, they're taking notes, they're drawing things and getting inspiration for things that they would bring back into their classroom. Next slide. In this slide, here you can see some of those same students. I really, as an educator, focused on tapping into student interest, especially at the comprehensive high school, because how do you engage folks who didn't even know that they had this creative aspect to their personalities? So everyone was working on something, a completely different medium. So if you can imagine being in a classroom, you might be in a painting classroom where everyone's working on the same painting media. Well, in this particular project that we worked on, everybody did something different. One student did photography, another student did photography, but then came back and brought it into the classroom and created this huge cityscape collage while another student worked on found objects using plastic water bottles that had been discarded. Next slide. And that in contrast to the next slide, where you don't have students who necessarily are technically good drawers, but teaching them how to do a basic face and having them all do these fully accomplished looking wonderful pieces that were self-expressive versions of themselves. Next slide. And in this one, this is when I was working at Arts High School, where the students came to the table already with talent. And you can see some of their work in the background, but these are actually images from a booklet that the students created for their senior art exhibit, which was an adjudicated exhibit. And they had to come up with their artist statement, and they each took a photo and created this wonderful booklet to memorialize their senior exhibit upon graduation at Arts High School. Next slide. So the previous slide were seniors. This slide represents my freshman class that I taught at Arts High School. And you can see, if you can see, they're doing some really highly evolved work. And this was in preparation for an exhibit that they were doing at one of the local galleries in downtown Newark. You can go to the next slide. And I know that we have a limitation on time. My final role was as I actually worked in the classroom for 10 years. Then I became a department chairperson at Arts High School, where I actually supervised not only visual arts, but world languages and health and phys ed of all things. So you really have to be very flexible and knowledgeable about different subject areas as a school-based administrator. I also eventually became a vice principal, assistant principal at the school. And then I moved into a position at central office where they asked me to serve as the director of visual and performing arts. In that role, I got to influence what happened district-wide in like 63 schools across the district. When I came into the role, we had 188 visual and performing arts educators, because as director of visual and performing arts, I supervised music, dance, theater, and the visual arts. And towards the end, began to engage more in the media arts. When I came into that role, we had 188 teachers. By the time I left, we had 235 teachers in visual and performing arts in our district, which was phenomenal. Every single school has arts educators, and every single school is required to have music and visual art. But we also have a huge dance program in 28 of the schools. And theater was our smallest area and something that we needed to work on more. But the thing about you can move to the next slide. The thing about being director, you get to influence a lot of other things. It's not just what's going on in your classroom. Here you see an image. I was responsible for doing professional development, not only for the educators, and you can see here in the upper left, those are our visual art educators. We do professional development for them at the Newark Museum of Art. And on the right-hand side, you see our music educators engaging in a recorder session at NJPAC. And so it's not just working with the educators and doing very specific professional development programs for them, but on the next slide, these are images of the school. Oh, I missed it. The school leaders. I guess I missed them. So this actually is programming here. So, we were responsible for doing district-wide program. You have school-based programs, but you also have district-wide programs. And here you can see art exhibits that we would do throughout the year. We do all-city dance, all-city music, several programs where students from across the entire district get to come together to collaborate on creating performances and exhibitions. Next slide. This is a continuation of that. You see some of our music programs. And also working with partners. You see the one slide there where we have VH1 Save the Music, partner with them to get instruments in like 47 of our elementary and high school programs. So you're also doing a lot of outreach to larger organizations to help support the goals of the district. Next one. I'm going to move through these next ones quick. So I started out at Arts High School as a student myself. I then went to Hampton University, where I majored in education and art, and graduated with a degree in art education. So even though Hampton is not an art school specifically, and other schools may not be specifically art colleges like a Parsons, but they have a fine arts department and an education department where they combine the two and you can get a degree in art education. So you need to be aware of that as you're doing your searching. You don't have to go to a school that is specific to the arts, but the school may have a fine arts department in it. After Hampton, I went to the new school, to Parsons School of Design, and that's where I got my background in fashion design. And then for educational leadership, my role as director and school administrator, I went to Montclair State University, where I did my ed leadership master's program. The next slide, I'm going to move really, really quick now. I have a list here, and again, you're going to have access to all of this, but I have a list of colleges and universities just for consideration. In fashion design, you can also do an associate degree, which is only a 2-year program, or you can do the bachelor's degree. And I've listed some key schools that actually do fashion design programs, but I also listed at the bottom Montclair State University and Howard University, because those type of schools also have, even though they're not exclusive to the arts, they also have fashion design programs as well. And it's a different kind of education than you might get at a Parsons or an FIT or a Pratt. On the left, for art education, certification is required. You need a bachelor's degree. And these are some colleges I listed, local universities here in the state of New Jersey, as well as Temple University in Philadelphia, Maryland, Howard University, and Virginia Commonwealth University, that have really good programs for art education. And then for ed leadership, I've listed a few schools here. And again, these are schools here in New Jersey. Some of you may be going out of state. I mean, you can go online and search and find all the resources that you need to find, but I just wanted to list some local and some near regional schools that you might have an interest in learning more about. You can flip to the next one. I've also provided for you here a list of high school experiences to do now. Like, what can you do right now that can help move you forward into whatever art career it is that you want to pursue? And obviously building a portfolio, joining an art club or makers club, participating in school and local art exhibits, county and state teen arts festivals. Everyone in the state of New Jersey can participate in their congressional district competition. That information should be available. Your art teacher should have that information to share with you. So definitely communicate with them. The Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, really, really important awards competition where they do financial to students who really get to the higher end of it in terms of the winners, but also they give great exposure to students who participate for colleges and universities that are actually looking at the list of students that participate for scholarship opportunities. And then you have your National Art Honor Societies through the NAEA, which is the National Art Educators Association. There's New Jersey Governor's Awards in Education. You absolutely want to make sure you're attending art museums and exhibits, enroll in summer arts camps, and also Saturday classes that are available at museums and local organizations. The next slide. This is a list of books that I'm sharing with you. These are books to inspire and encourage your creativity, regardless of what field you may go into in the arts. These are some really helpful tools that are even good for adults, but they're really, really great to sort of help you find your creative and artistic voice, and also to help you break through some barriers, because sometimes we have some barriers. You know, we can't come up with the ideas. You know, we need a place to go. So these are some book recommendations for you. The final slide, I think it's the final slide. What I've listed here are some websites that you can go to get more in-depth information about types of careers, what the requirements are for these careers. There are many careers that that you can do, like alternate pathways where you don't have to go to college, but it means that you have to do the work and you have to be consistent about the work that you do in order to pursue those careers. And also it's like practice, practice, practice to stay up on your craft. I'm at a point now in my life where I'm going to begin doing fine art again. And it's like I've got to have my little sketchbook and I just got to start drawing all over again because I haven't had that opportunity to do that in quite some time. And if you look over my shoulder, this is an old piece that I did back in like 2000. So I've got to really get back into the groove of it. And I'm excited to do that, even as you're at a place where you're beginning to start your career. But I also know that you can transition and do different things. You don't have to be locked into one thing. You can see here that I've done several things throughout my life. So don't feel like you have to be locked into one particular thing. But I always want you, what's really important is to always explore, stretch, and commit to your creative potential. And creative potential even goes beyond just the work that we do as artists. So keep that in mind too, because your creative potential could be tapped into a career outside of the arts as well. And with that, I'm going to stop here and see if there are any questions.
Hey, so those colleges you were displaying for like art educators and fashion educators, those are just like the colleges, but that require you to have degrees for because that's all because you need a degree to be a teacher.
Yes, absolutely. For education, the other thing though, there are folks who are teaching artists, but they don't necessarily work for a school system. They are artists on their own. So, for example, I would bring teaching artists in to do projects with my kids. They didn't necessarily have to have a degree, but they did to have a background in the arts. Like they were artists, in themselves. They were self-actualized artists. But we also have to do, sometimes it depends, you may have to do background checks just to make sure that they can be in the classroom with the students. But it doesn't require, but that's a teaching artist, and those are consulting positions. Whereas an educator in a classroom has to have a teaching certificate.
Thank you for that question, Sienna, and Margaret for the ability to bring in the critical role that teaching artists play as a complement to the arts ecosystem in our schools. I would encourage anyone, if you have other questions, because Margaret gave us so much to think through and to think about, please drop it into the chat if it's convenient. Jane, shall I bring up your slides? Are you ready for us to transition?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
And please, because we are a little bit off of our original timeline, don't be shy about putting questions into the chat if you're able to do so. And maybe we'll have a moment towards the end for those who need to ask that question with the mute off. So let me pull up.
Okay. I'll do my best to work through quickly.
Well, and that's why I was encouraging to use for us to use all
Yes.
available ways to communicate here.
Yes. So, welcome everyone. I am Jane Graziano, and I'm here which was kind of nice that Margaret, you went first because you are the arts administrator or supervisor in the school, right? So I'm going to focus a lot more on being an art teacher. And my role at the university is to train art teachers or future art teachers as students who want to become art teachers in the state of New Jersey. I put this little image here of an installation project that I did out in the schools with my students. So my students are college students who are working toward getting the degree for teaching in art and also for certification by the state of New Jersey. So we do a lot in the field working so that they're getting the experience of working in the schools. How many of you, show of hands, maybe have had a student teacher in your classroom? Anyone? You remember? No? So these are the students. I've got a few of them. Yeah, so they're teachers in training. We call them interns, and they have gone through these art education programs. And in their last year, they're placed in the schools, and it's on-the-job training, frankly. Next slide. So this is just one of my favorite. There's so many favorite quotes out there for artists, right? Art enables us to find ourselves and lose ourselves at the same time. So my role as a teacher, training teachers, is to help my students find themselves in their art. And in that process, they often lose themselves, right? So you get into that zone, you don't remember the time of the day, right? It just you're just there as an artist, and it's a wonderful feeling. And I know all of you have probably felt that at one time, right? Next slide. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit after some introductions about what our teachers do. I thought that might be good for you because I know my students coming in oftentimes think that their art teacher is just having a ball. But there's a lot of work you do behind the scenes, and it's sometimes heavy lifting. So I thought it might be for those of you who are considering becoming an art teacher to get a little view of what the workload is. And then I'm going to give you a little roadmap of what kinds of what's the degree, where do you go with that? You know, how do you get certified by the state to become an art teacher? Um, uh, and and then give you some time maybe to ask some questions. Next slide. So about me, as I said, I'm a professor of art education at Rowan University. I've been there for 25 years, and time went very quickly for me. The one thing that's nice about being a professor at a university and being in charge of an art education program is you often get to teach studio courses too. So that's, for me, it's important to keep up with my craft. I am mainly a watercolorist. My favorite medium is also clay. I haven't done that in quite a while because I've been focusing on watercolor. But I also teach the elementary and the secondary art methods courses and the clinical practice courses. And the clinical practice courses are in the last year. So it's a four-year college. So in the fourth year, you are focusing on the job training out in the schools, and we're out there doing the supervision of that. I have a degree from University of Illinois. That's in the Midwest, so it's far from the East Coast. I have a BA in liberal arts and sciences, believe it or not. I was a biology major with an art minor. And this might, maybe some of you feel the same sometimes too. I remember my brother telling me, don't go into the arts because you'll never make a living. And I waffled back and forth in my college career because of that statement. I took it to heart. So I went into biology thinking, well, I won't get a job in art, but I stuck with an art minor and kept to it. And I worked in the science field for a while after I got out of school. And then I really missed the arts and I went back to it and I went back to school and I made up the courses that I missed. And I went on for a master's in art education and got my teaching certification. I taught for 7 years, both public and private schools. So I got that experience. But then I really started to think, well, I would like to teach teachers how to do this. So I went on for a doctorate and I attended Teachers College, Columbia University, and it probably was, as far as schooling goes, the best years of my life. I loved being in New York. I loved being with many of the the students that attend Teachers College are teachers already, and they're going back to school while they're teaching. And just the camaraderie that I built, and I'm still friends with so many of them. It's just invaluable to me. So, I know it's hard sometimes when you think, do I have to keep going to school? Uh, but there's something about building a community. You're with people who are doing the same thing you're doing, and it's a wonderful experience. Next slide. So I know we don't have time to get into me finding out what it is you do and why it is maybe you want to teach. But I thought maybe stick in the chat if those of you who are attending this session, if you're really interested in becoming an art teacher, I would like to know. And feel free to add anything in the chat too that you might have a question about teaching art, and how is that different from making art, and how do you kind of integrate the two? Next slide. Is another quote from Elliot Eisner. He was one of the great arts educators out from Stanford University, and he wrote that the arts teach children that problems can have more than one solution and that questions can have more than one answer. And it's another reason why I love the arts, and it is because it's not like math class or history class where there is one right answer, there is one fact. There are many answers to the problems that we explore in the arts, and I just love that about it. Next slide. So, what do our teachers do? Our teachers plan and they teach. I think sometimes students think that art teachers come up with these ideas in their heads and then they just teach it. But there's a lot of planning that goes into being an art teacher. Generally, they have a curriculum guide that is a very broad, it lays it all out very broadly what the teacher needs to focus on. So, mainly in high school, they will focus on the arts elements and principles. And this curriculum guide will kind of lay this out for them. But for every art principle or art element they're going to teach, for example, line, they can come up with as many lessons as they want to help you develop what line looks like or how many uses of lines there are. So in that respect, I think teaching is very, very creative, right? Our teachers are always coming up with ideas, and they share ideas very easily. You never have to work when you go to one of their conferences. It's all about idea sharing, and it's another wonderful community to be part of. Then they have to take these ideas and transform them into lesson objectives and goals. And probably some of you know that your art teacher will post those objectives on the board, or maybe they'll post them on a bulletin board or a handout for you. But those objectives are thought of well in advance, and they're crafted very carefully. So that's important to them. They also have to think about the supplies for every lesson that they teach. They have to have those supplies on hand. That takes a lot of administrative work behind the scenes that maybe you're not aware of. They don't just walk into a classroom and open a closet and all the supplies are there. They have to plan for those supplies and order them. They also have to plan for ways to measure their students' successes. And those are the quizzes and the tests and the worksheets and all that most often art teachers design themselves. They don't get them out of books. So it's another creative side to teaching art because they need to give you grades, right? And the measurements they use need to be fair and closely linked to those objectives that they've set. So everything kind of comes around full circle for each lesson that they've planned and taught. And they also need to develop supports for students who might need them. We talked a little bit earlier, Sienna. I'm glad you're in this session. You talked a little bit about IEPs and, how art teachers can help students who might have some disabilities. And I think it was Wendy who said that the art room is open to all learners, and the art teacher is there to ensure that all learners have the opportunity to succeed in the arts. So it's another aspect of teaching that art teachers need to be on top of and very aware of. Next slide. So besides teaching, all right, besides all that planning that goes into the lessons that you engage in, our teachers also have to be classroom managers. They need to budget and order supplies. They need to maintain the supplies and the equipment in the classroom. And they need to plan ahead, stay organized, and teach their students to do the same. You've probably all been in the art classroom where you've had rules and routines that your art teacher is trying to get you to follow. And, there's a real good point to that. It's so that if you have the least amount of disruptions in a class so that you can get your work done, right? Because if the art teacher is always having to stop the class to address something, it stops you and it stops your train of thought and it stops that moment where you can get into the zone. And that's what's so important about art making. The other thing I want to let you know, if you're interested in teaching, you can be an elementary art teacher, you can be a middle school art teacher, and you can be a high school art teacher. One of the reasons in our program at Rowan that we place students at all levels, we place our students in the schools at all levels, because at the end, they're going to have to make that decision. Do I want to teach high school art? Do I want to teach the young artists? Do I want to teach elementary art? And it is interesting, I find, that many students who come in saying they want to teach high school. And I think it's because they're coming out of high school, so they're most familiar with high school art classes. But then over the course of 4 years, they all change their minds. They're all shifting all over the place and they have their priorities because they've had the experiences of being in the schools at those grade levels, and help them to make a decision. So the tough thing about being an elementary art teacher is you may see 7 different grade levels. So if you're an elementary art teacher, you can be pre-K through grade 5, right? You could have 2 second grades, you could have 2 third grades, you could have 2 fourth grades. It's endless sometimes, which means you might need to remember over 300 names, right? When I taught K through 8, I had to remember 600 names. I thought it was impossible, but I did it. And I think too, being a visual person helps a lot, right? So you connect names with faces. Then there's middle school where you're really only addressing grades 6 through 8, or high school 9 through 12. But if you really think about it, at one grade level, an art teacher may complete about 15 projects in a year. And that's a lot of preparation and planning, right? So to be an art teacher, you do have to have a pretty good sense of being organized. And if you're not an organized person, I guarantee you teaching is going to teach you how to be an organized person, because it's a lot. The other thing that our teachers do is they communicate with the families of students and school staff and administrators, and also advocating for their art program. So you will need to, at some point, be in front of the school board and championing your program to ensure it stays in the schools. Next slide.
Jane, as we transition, I want to give you a gentle time check that there's
Oh
about
boy, okay.
before we're
go on.
transitioning back to the main room.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so you have to have behavior. I think I talked about this already. Behavior management skills, rooms, right? Art room rules, routines, You might have to do other jobs in the school, like hall monitor, lunch duty, that kind of thing. The other thing art teachers do is they display students' artwork, and they coordinate art exhibitions in community spaces. Next slide. Okay, so how do you become a teacher? I think Margaret already did talk a little bit about this, right? So you need to get a college degree, a BA in art. It could be a BFA. Um, in some programs, if you're in the undergraduate, the BA or the BFA, you can tack on certification courses to that. If you don't do that while you're in college and you do the BA and the BFA, you can later go back to school for a master's with a combined certification. And then the state also has an alternate route program that's a series of weekend courses that can lead to certification. It's a little bit more complicated, but just to let you know, so there are kind of three ways to go about this. Okay, next slide. Oh, we're going to close. All right, so I just listed, they're going to share the slides, right?
Yes,
Here.
we'll be sure that the slides are put into
Oh,
the
okay, good. All right. So these are some of the courses that you take at the college level. Okay, next slide. And also, as in college programs, you get, and I did talk about that, you do get placed out in the schools to do hands-on with cooperating teachers. So you're not kind of thrown out there to try to figure this out. And it really is a great experience being an art teacher. It is a way to combine your creativity, right? So it's not just making art with your students, but creating ways for them to make the art. So it's another layer added